Dammam city is an important Saudi port on the Arabian Gulf. Over the years, the city has expanded to the city limits of two other modern towns, Al-Khubar and Dhahran, becoming the largest town in the eastern Saudi Arabian region. Near Dammam are located the most important centers in the world for the production and refining of petroleum. The population of Dammam is greater than 1 million. In the early 1980s, Dammam, the capital of the eastern region, was a separate city, but so close to Al-Khubar and Dhahran that the traveler could pass from one to the other in a few minutes. With the continuing expansion of all parts of the kingdom, the three towns inevitably merged into one, creating a simple municipality known as the Dammam area. Each of the three towns which compose the Dammam area retain their own character and some local administrative functions, but in terms of its place in the kingdom, the Dammam area forms a single administrative entity. The Bedouins are a nomadic people who, historically, have lived across the Middle East and North Africa, inhabiting arid areas and moving their base with the changing of the seasons. Traditionally the province of women, the Bedouin weaving and use of palm fronds was developed in their unique culture, creating household items suited for life in the desert. Saudi Arabia's traditional culture produced woven, wooden, leather and metal objects whose great beauty sprang from their everyday usefulness and the taste of their makers. Over the past few decades, however, most of these objects have been displaced from people's lives by mass-produced substitutes and by changes in lifestyle brought about by prosperity. Yet their rich heritage continues to live on, against all odds. Henna is very popular in Saudi Arabia. Since the time of the Bedouins, henna has been used to decorate mainly women during special celebrations like weddings. Henna is a cosmetic paste that is solely used for decoration. It comes from the leaves of the plant with the same name. The leaves are crushed into a green powder, which is sold in souks all over the kingdom and the Arab world. To apply henna, water is first added to the powder, making it into a paste. It is then applied directly to the body. After leaving the paste on the body for some time, which may be up to 2 hours, a deep orange color is left on the skin, which will slowly fade away over a period of 2 to 3 weeks. The henna is often applied in intricate patterns, primarily to decorate the hands or the feet. Pottery, in color, shape, texture and use, is as rich and varied in man's hands as poetry. And it is as expressive, especially in the hands of the new historian archaeologists of Saudi Arabia, who are reusing findings of broken bits of clay to shape the history of Eastern Arabia in the Neolithic age. It was through pottery, indeed, that one of the earliest Neolithic cultures in the Middle East, the Ubaid culture, was identified. Ubaid is neither a language or a race. It is simply a peculiarly fine kind of pottery which stands as a flag of cultural identity. Bowls and cups and jugs made of greenish-yellow clay with deep red, brown and black geometric designs painted on. but it has also come to include the peoples, the master potters who developed this culture. Today, skilled Saudi Arabian craftsmen make pottery using the same techniques as their predecessors. They do not only produce items for daily use in their practical form, they also produce them as pieces of art. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia boasts of a wonderful heritage and magnificent culture. The excellent range of arts and crafts of Saudi Arabia is evidence of the inherent artistic bent of mind of its people. When one leafs through the pages of Saudi Arabia's history, one will definitely be engrossed in the stories of the Bedouin. It was the Bedouins whose skills made Saudi Arabian arts and crafts a name to be reckoned with. A constant vagrant life in the desert made it necessary for the Bedouins to weave heavy cloth that would serve the dual purpose of a garment and a decor for the caravan. These people were also highly into metal work. Apart from such crafts, they made fabulous and intricate jewelry. Most of these earned them money because they sold their products to the desert dwellers. Steadily, their distinctive craftsmanship made their products symbols of the arts of the Arab kingdom. Delightfully impressed saddles and delicately carved turquoise and silver amulets are typical of such crafts. Bedouins also made lovely garments adorned with stones and woven with intricacy. These are precious motifs of the arts and crafts of Saudi Arabia that are now preserved in museums throughout the kingdom. Normally, Bedouins weave on ground looms made of 2 sturdy lengths of wood staked into the ground. The long warp threads are stretched back and forth between them, and the weaver sits at one beam inserting the wefts or crosswise yarns. Sometimes the looms are adapted to the house if the craftsman works at home. From time to time while weaving, the weaver adjusts the tension in the warp with a sword beater, a heavy, flat stick pointed at both ends, 75 centimeters or 30 inches long by 75 millimeters, 3 inches wide. The weaver would slide the stick under the warps and then tighten them by turning the flat side vertical. Bedouin carpet designs are normally geometrical, straight-lined and repetitive because of the simple looms and because all designs are committed to memory. Above all, weaving is indispensable to nomadic life, for it provides saddlebags, blankets, heavy clothing, furniture, and even shelter in easily portable form. But carpets also became primary features in the urban life of Islam. Traditionally, Muslims eat, sit, sleep, and pray on carpets, which are kept clean by the estimable custom of removing street shoes on entering a building. The carpet is the principal furniture and ornament of both houses and mosques. But once they moved into town, carpets were transformed. A city carpet can be made much bigger than its country cousin, as it is woven on a permanent loom worked by many hands in the home or factory. By definition, an antique is any item 70 to 100 years old or older. Many Saudi Arabians take up collecting antiques as a hobby. Some of them go through a lot of trouble to obtain the items they collect. With the passion they have for this hobby, nothing can stand in the way of getting what they want. They collect a variety of items, not only native to their cultural heritage, but also native to the culture of others. An antique is desirable and collected because of its age, rarity, condition, utility, or other unique feature. It is an object that represents a previous era in human history. Antiques are usually objects which show some degree of craftsmanship or a certain attention to design, such as a desk or the early automobile. They are bought at antique shops, auctions, or passed down as part of an estate. The collecting of antique furniture is a particularly popular subdivision due to the practical characteristics of these antiques. Antique furniture includes dining tables, chairs, bureaus, chests, and other things. The most common woods are mahogany, oak, pine, walnut, and rosewood. The most common place to get antiques is the auction, and Saudi Arabia is famous for its traditional souks and public auctions. An auction is a process of buying and selling goods or services by offering them up for a bid, taking bids, and then selling the item to the winning bidder. There are several variations on the basic auction form, including time limits, minimum or maximum limits on bid prices, and special rules for determining the winning bidder and sale price. Unlike Western auctions, participants in a Saudi Arabian auction know the identities or actions of other participants.
Among the passions that we have picked up from our forefathers is the passion for collecting antiques. These things are a gateway to earlier life because they show us how life was. It tells us a story about how these things were used and what types of objects were used for what purpose. That is why my late father always encouraged us to collect such items and keep them well. We have a variety of things that we were able to collect over the years. This is a Quran written by hand using gold and ink. It is not very old, it is only around 60 to 70 years old. We have other Qur'ans written by hand as well in gold ink. This Quran is a very rare one. It was also handwritten in 1138 Hijri. It was written by Mahmud Safwan. This is a religious book containing some religious poetry and hadith. The cover is made, of course, of leather. It is a very old book. Look at the writing. Books and Qur'ans have always been of much importance, which is why sometimes you may find birth certificates and death certificates written on the first or last page of each book. It has a dua. It has many prayers, and it also has an explanation of the dua or prayer, as well as the hadith. It also contains religious poetry. These are old Islamic jars. This particular design is rare because it has 3 handles. This one is made of iron, sheets of iron. This lantern is an old train lantern and was used to light the way for trains. These are gold-plated plaques with pictures of the most important mosques in the world. This is a ship representing the actual model of old ships. This is an old clock. This is a soldier's helmet dating back to the Second World War. These bullets are blanks and were used only to scare away enemies also during the Second World War. This is an ancient shield made of elephant skin. It's actually called a buckler. These are a group of swords. This one is gold-plated, and those two have a handle made of horn. This is an ancient Saudi Arabian sword. This is also an ancient short sword. This is called a jawhar. It is an ancient dagger. It's covered in silver from the front and made of leather from the back. There's another type, which is all made of silver from both ends.
Auctions have a long history, having been recorded as early as 500 BC. For most of history, auctions have been a relatively uncommon way to negotiate the exchange of goods and commodities. In practice, both haggling and sale by set price have been significantly more common. Indeed, prior to the 17th century, the few auctions that were held were sporadic and infrequent.
This is a Safawi pot made of copper. It is carved with designs of kings and soldiers. This was used as a water heater. We found it in Egypt. This is a saddle for camels. It was lined with leather. This is a mehbash, or a mortar and pestle for making coffee. This is the oldest one we have. The other newer versions are covered with copper to make the wood stronger and to avoid breaking. This is a drum made of natural animal skin. Even the strings are made of leather. This is a very old gramophone that is still working.
The Bedouin lifestyle involved migrating with herds in search of pasture, supplying their produce to the oasis markets, raiding settled communities, and the trade caravans that crossed the desert and levying tolls from them. There was no private ownership of land, as each tribe held its pastures and water sources communally. Bedouin society was characterized by a fierce loyalty to family, clan, and tribe, which triggered blood feuds and demanded revenge killings. They had a rigid code of honor in which the chastity of their women was very important and which included hospitality and generosity. In the midst of all the poetry and verbal expression, also in the form of songs and storytelling, was their greatest artistic attainment. Their poems and songs celebrated heroic deeds of the tribe and its warriors and were recited or sung around campfires. They were passed down orally from generation to generation. Poetry remains popular among Saudis today. They gather at each other's homes in a majlis and at cultural events, most notably the Janadriya National Culture and Heritage Festival, and avidly recite their words or read the works of established poets that are printed in Saudi Arabia every year. There is also a popular televised poetry competition.
The salt was introduced to Yemen from India and was then passed on into the Gulf. In the Gulf, Muhammad Faris altered it to the style we sing now and has become known as Khaliji salt. The salt, of course, is formed of the oud, the violin, and is accompanied by the art of clapping.
A living piece of the country's history, Saudi folk music has been shaped by the nomadic Bedouins and the pilgrims who brought musical influences from around the world. Music varies from region to region in the kingdom. For example, in the Hijaz region, the music of Al-Sahba combines poetry and songs of Arab Andalusia, while the folk music of Mecca and Medina reflects these two cities' influences from throughout the Islamic world. As for the southern area, which borders the Republic of Yemen, the effect of Yemeni music is very evident there. Much in addition to poetry and music shaped the lives of the Bedouins. Two factors mainly shaped the interactions of Bedouin people: the Arab tradition of hospitality and the Bedouin code of honor, or sharaf. These customs have been shaped by the extreme conditions of desert nomadism. Survival as small groups of wanderers in the harsh desert required tremendous cooperation. A guest fed in one's own tent today may be the one who could provide food tomorrow. Passers-by traditionally exchanged formal greetings with the families in the tents they passed and were asked for any news. The polite reply was to say one has no news or only good news. The passers-by were then invited into the men's side of the tent for coffee and tea, served in a ritual way. It is still considered polite to drink at least 3 cups before wobbling your glass to show that you do not want it refilled. Guests were assured of food and shelter for 3 1/3 days, and then protection for another 3 days after leaving the tent. that being considered the length of time it takes for all traces of the host's food to pass through the guest's body. Anyone who even exchanged greetings, whether they came into the tent or not, was considered a guest entitled to the host's protection for the customary 3 days. The music of the Bedouin and its modern imitations in Saudi Arabia are all part of classical Arab music. Classical Arab music was defined by theorists during the classical age of the Arab Empire, and that definition continues to play a role today. While such a pan-Arab intellectual style is not as strong today as it once was, the various modern regional traditions have arisen from similar roots. Indeed, the idea of classical Arabic music was culled from a variety of regional traditions in the first place. Arab music is modal and monophonic. The modal system is sometimes based on theoretical octave scales of 17, 19, or 24 notes, although the temperament is not generally equal, and the practice is essentially diatonic, where the infrachromaticisms are expressed in neutral thirds. The favorite modes, or maqamat, come from throughout the greater Arab world. Classical Arabic theory and practice can be seen as a great synthesis of both the earlier classical traditions as well as regional melodic forms. Those constituent melodies were united in a theoretical way, such that they could be combined fluidly in performance. The most serious musical expression has historically been solo instrumental improvisation, taqsim, although there are related vocal forms associated. These are known as layali. Musicians modulate frequently, and indeed, a performance which remained in a single mode would not be considered fully artistic in nature. Much of the art is in the way a performer will select and prepare his modulations, especially in terms of following a tangential train of thought and back again. There is a wide variety of instruments, although plucked strings are the most visible, including the oud, the ancestor of the European lute. Whereas improvisation was exalted in the classical period and remains an important part of modern musicianship, classical and modern poetry set to song is an important part of the Arab tradition. The style typically involves suites of songs, connected by improvisation, both vocal and instrumental. Various older styles have played a role in the development of what eventually became Saudi Arabian classical music, making the reconstruction of earlier Arab music a unique art of composing. We can generally say that as part of classical Arabic music, much of Saudi Arabian music is characterized by an emphasis on melody and rhythm as opposed to harmony. There are some genres of Arabic music that are polyphonic,